domestic violence relationship. I was married to a man that I thought loved me, and he began to abuse me. My husband had been arrested actually 28 times, but he never did the full time, and he would get out. I was tired of my children watching me be kicked and spit on and beaten and guns pulled to my head if I did not do what I was told as if I was one of the children. And he would always tell me he owned me, and as long as I had his last name, he would control me. When we had the chance to get away before he made it home, I would take my children and we would go in the car and we would sleep in a park or grocery store, wherever I found safety, wherever I felt like they were tired enough and could drift off to sleep in peace. After the children and I would sleep in the car, we would wake up that morning and I would take them to a fast food restaurant, get them dressed, wipe their faces, and allow them to prepare themselves for school. I would go to work and I would do my job, and I would do it with a smile on my face. I never took my problems to work, although I was literally dying inside, but I went to work and I did my job. Fortunately, my children would go to school and they would not let our situation at home interfere with their schoolwork.
Despite her best attempts at a normal life, Yolanda knew in her heart that she had to take action to protect herself and her children.
I didn't have the money to pay for a divorce. Legal Services took my case. They handled my case as if I walked into a law firm and I paid money. I was able to get my divorce and obtain my last name back and begin to start my life with my children. Today I'm different because I'm stronger, and I can't thank the Florida Bar Foundation enough for their support, because without their support, I may have been one that did not get the help that I needed, and I thank you very much for that.
Every day, thousands of people like Yolanda are helped by legal aid organizations supported by the Florida Bar Foundation and its mission of providing greater access to justice. But when the foundation was chartered in 1956, the idea that it would one day become a national leader and the only statewide funder of legal services for the improvement of our system of justice was not much more than a dream. Now, 50 years later, that dream is a reality.
There was a great growing need in this country, not only the state of Florida, for people who were gone unrepresented, whose rights were being denied because of a lack of funds or because they didn't know where to go to get legal help. The Florida Bar Foundation was formed in 1956 by a very distinguished group of gentlemen. The mandate, or the charter, provided very noble purposes. So they created this Glenn Turrell Scholarship, and this was the deal. They would guarantee the loans of, quote, worthy law students, and they would pay it back, and they would have to start paying back this loan the first month after they graduated law school.
In order to maintain and expand the scope of the foundation's early programs, new members and funds were needed.
Well, in 1969, I think it was, Mark Halsey was president of the Florida Bar, and he asked me to serve as president of the Florida Bar Foundation for the purpose of trying to revitalize it. We elected persons to become members of the foundation, we being the Board of Governors of the Florida Bar, and then asked those persons to contribute $100 a year for 5 years.
Later, Bill Henry and Louis Adcock would lead a successful campaign securing additional $500 pledges from those early fellows.
We made the first contributions to legal aid organizations, of which I'm aware, by virtue of grants to Florida Legal Services and Southern Legal Counsel.
When the 1970s came along, the legal services to the poor were considerably slashed.
With the cuts in federal support for legal services, the search began for new sources of funding.
The first discussions were brought up at board level by Colonel Norman Faulkner about having lawyer trust accounts be interest-bearing, and that the interest then would be used for some charitable purpose. And the momentum started getting stronger and stronger on the board that we should appoint a committee to look into all facets of IOTA interest on trust accounts. But the real catalyst that got the ball rolling very fast was a Supreme Court Justice named Arthur England.
I went out to Vancouver, met with all the people who had put their interest on trust accounts program together, came back to Florida with a proposal which I outlined at the Bar Convention in July of 1976. The outcome of that was a petition by the Bar to the Florida Supreme Court asking to create an IOTA program. That was followed by an opinion I wrote for the court in 1978 adopting such a program. And the court decided that the Bar Foundation should be the implementing agency and that legal services to the poor should be the major activity. But perhaps the most important key was Henry Zapruder. This was a tax attorney in Washington, D.C. that I was introduced to and asked to assist in getting the Internal Revenue Service to approve the necessary tax changes that had to take place in order for this program to work. That led to the creation of the National IOTA Clearinghouse. Again, the Florida Justice Institute. Randy Berg, Peter Siegel created that. And we had a flying team of people who would go anywhere at any time to help in any way we could, which included Russ Carlisle.
Well, we had a long road to hoe, and it took us 3 years to get from the Supreme Court opinion in 1978 to actually collecting money in 1981. The first thing we had to do was to get the regulatory approvals. The Internal Revenue Service, the Home Loan Bank Board, the Federal Reserve.
So during my year of the presidency of the Bar, we spent most of that time negotiating and meeting with the Internal Revenue Service in order to get their approvals effectuated. And the court at that time during that year authorized the implementation of the IOTA program.
David Scheer chaired the commission that implemented the IOTA program in Florida, aided in great measure by his successor.
Sam Smith, his year was the banner year, and he was a magnificent leader because all of this happened during his term as president when all the approvals were finally obtained and we were ready to go.
Though victorious, new challenges would arise for the Florida Bar Foundation and its IOTA program.
The IOTA challenge, which was by a member of the Cone family, which is a very prominent construction company in Tampa, brought their suit challenging the IOTA program, and it was not an easy task. And of course, we ultimately were successful in defeating the challenge.
In addition to the court challenge in the late 1980s, the foundation had to convince the Florida Supreme Court of the merits of mandatory IOTA participation.
The one accomplishment I'd be proud of as president of the Bar Foundation would have been this glide path to mandatory IOTA. The second would be helping the foundation determine that it really was a private organization with flexibility to do good philanthropic things. So I think the current program is a good program. It ought to continue as long as we can continue it. But in the process, we need to build up this long-term fund called the Endowment Trust. That'll provide permanency to the Florida Bar Foundation and some reliability to the funding that goes to the important legal aid, legal services programs.
Because of IOTA and the vision of foundation leaders, legal aid is available for those who need it.
Children overall have very few rights. There are very few attorneys who are representing children and advocating for children. So you have this whole population out there who are just not part of our mainstream legal system. Here at the Jones-Abbey Center, what we try to do is provide full legal services for our clients. I think when we look at children's advocacy in the state of Florida, but for the Florida Bar Foundation, I would say hundreds of children would have died.
The Florida Immigrant Advocacy Center is a nonprofit organization. We provide free legal help to immigrants of all nationalities. Without the Florida Bar Foundation, there would be no Florida Immigrant Advocacy Center, no FIAC. And their continued support has been absolutely instrumental in our ability to reach out to more than 40,000 people over these past 10 years.
The leadership and support of the Florida Bar Foundation has significantly affected other legal aid programs. Without Foundation general support funding and grants for impact work, migrant farm workers, the disabled, and those who are institutionalized might not have had a voice.
A commission was formed jointly by the Foundation and the Board of Governors of the Florida Bar to study and to make recommendations on funding for legal services in Florida. Paul Doyle had just returned back to Jacksonville, and we were fortunate to be able to hire Paul as our staff director. We finished our work on time and filed our report with the Supreme Court of Florida, who accepted it and then asked us to draft a new rule regulating the Florida Bar that became the pro bono rule.
It is because of the leadership of Foundation volunteers and staff that our brightest young legal minds are now more than ever considering a career in public service.
One of the things I'm extremely proud of is the institution of the Summer Fellowships Program during my tenure as president. While it had been discussed through the AOJ committee, this was the first time we were able to have the funding available and to actually institute such a program. And they're doing very well with making sure that other students get that opportunity to work with these legal services programs and projects.
Under our Administration of Justice grant program, we provide, we look at it like venture capital to entities that have innovative programs that they want to implement.
Recent Administration of Justice grant programs include an innovative court program to improve the collection of child support payments, and funding to make it possible for members of the general public to participate in court improvement efforts. Another example of Foundation leadership is a program to help its legal aid grantees retain talented staff attorneys.
If you're concerned about the financial responsibilities after coming out of law school with significant loans, programs like the Florida Bar Foundation and their loan repayment assistance program will allow you to make the leap into public interest law a little bit easier.
The good work being done by the Florida Bar Foundation and its grantees is also attributable to the cooperation of Florida's banking community.
A bank is nothing more than a reflection of the community in which it operates. And as such, if the community is prospering, the bank is going to prosper, and the converse of that is also true. So our community involvement is a very important part of our mission. The board, the staff, the whole leadership of the Florida Bar Foundation is very focused on maintaining a sustainable model.
With sustainable funding as the goal, the Florida Bar Foundation has established an endowment and revitalized its development efforts.
Creating endowments and planned gifts are very important because it provides for the future of the organization. An endowment is similar to a savings account where you only use the interest from that particular account to spend, and it's there in perpetuity. Planned giving is a wonderful way for all the lawyers and all the non-lawyers in the state of Florida to recognize the work that the foundation does and to acknowledge the wonderful work that they do by leaving them in their wills.
Well, I think as a profession we're very blessed in the fact that we have such a responsibility to the public. And I think the Florida Bar Foundation in that way gives us the opportunity to contribute in a way that will allow everybody to hopefully have access to the legal system.
The Florida Bar Foundation endowment was established in the early 1990s. The vision behind the endowment was that of former director and president Bill Henry.
Bill was a visionary, and he understood the least of people and the most of people, and therefore he realized that there was a great gap between the haves and the have-nots.
Increases in foundation assets from IOTA and fundraising must be managed diligently.
Stewardship comes from a lot of different factors, but at its core, I think it stems from the dedication and quality of the Foundation's board and leadership.
The leadership of the Foundation was looking for alternative methods to support legal services for the poor in our state. As a result of a feasibility study, we determined that there were many people in the state who were prepared to support legal services, and so we reinvigorated our Fellows program. We've been very successful with that program, and it's really helped minimize the fluctuations that the Interest on Trust Account program is able to generate for legal services for the poor in our state.
As the Foundation continued to expand its programs, Terry Russell and Dudley Goodlett joined forces to make the dream of state funding for legal assistance a reality.
The main goal of the Florida Access to Civil Legal Assistance Act was to provide a mechanism for the state of Florida to provide tax dollars for the provision of legal services to the poor, and by far the champion in the Florida legislature with respect to the Civil Legal Assistance Act was Dudley Goodlett. He's a legislative hero, which is why he was recognized last year with the Medal of Honor.
Each year, the Foundation recognizes people like Dudley Goodlett for their outstanding contributions to improving the administration of justice by awarding the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor Award is the highest honor awarded to a member of Florida's legal profession. The Foundation also presents the Stephen M. Goldstein Award for Excellence every 2 years to recognize high-quality, significant impact work by a Legal Assistance for the Poor grant program. The award honors the late Stephen M. Goldstein, a tireless advocate for the poor throughout his career as a legal services attorney and professor of law at Florida State University School of Law. As the Florida Bar Foundation moves towards its first century of helping the poor and improving access to justice, the need remains enormous. With your continued support, people living in poverty can replace their fear with hope, their sadness with joy, and their despair with justice.